Howdy, folks. Let me tell you something that will sound absolutely insane at first. Imagine the endless sands of the Sahel, where the sun scorches the earth, where rivers shrink to dust, where entire generations were defined by drought and hunger. Now, picture this same land announcing the harvest of 100 tons of silkworms. Yes, silkworms, the fragile little creatures you probably imagine in the misty valleys of China or the humid villages of India being raised in the burning desert of Burkina Faso. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? For decades, Burkina Faso was a nation painted in the language of desperation. Aid packages, famine warnings, foreign pity. The West gave its charity, and the people were expected to remain quiet, dependent, and grateful. But one man refused that fate. President Ibrahim Traoré stepped before his people with an idea so shocking that many dismissed it as madness. Silkworms in the desert, mulberry groves in the Sahel, factories weaving silk in a land long scarred by poverty. The world laughed, but his people did not, because in those fragile cocoons, Traoré saw something the rest of the world could not: survival, sovereignty, and pride. Holding a basket of silkworm cocoons high, he declared, "From these fragile threads, we will weave strength. This is not about fashion. This is about freedom. And tonight, my friends, I want you to walk with me into that desert to witness how a nation mocked as barren dared to pull silk from sand." The question that should shake every heart is this: if worms, creatures of darkness and silence, can defy the desert, what else is Africa hiding, waiting to shock the world? If that vision makes you stop and think, I invite you to subscribe and stay with us, because this is only the beginning of a story that will leave you breathless. The morning sun over Koudagou was merciless, a blazing fireball that turned the sky white and the earth red. Yet thousands of villagers, farmers, women's cooperatives, students, and soldiers gathered in celebration, their drums and voices rising into the dry air. This was no ordinary festival. It was history being written in silk. In the center of the crowd stood President Ibrahim Traoré. He was not wrapped in medals or sitting in a high office chair. He rolled up his sleeves, stepped into the dust, and plunged his hands deep into a woven basket of silkworm cocoons. Lifting them high above his head, he shouted words that thundered across the square. "These are not just worms. These are our future. From this silk, we will weave our freedom." The crowd erupted with cheers, their joy echoing louder than the desert winds. For decades, Burkina Faso's economy had been trapped. Cotton was shipped away raw, enriching foreign corporations while villagers remained poor. Gold mines were owned by outsiders, their profits disappearing overseas. And when droughts came, Burkina families lined up for sacks of aid grain. That was the story the world expected to see forever: dependency and silence. But on this day, trucks rolled into Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso carrying baskets of cocoons instead of foreign aid. Villages held parades as the harvest was weighed: 100 tons of silkworm cocoons shimmering like treasure. The sound of ululations and drumming filled the air. Elders wiped tears from their eyes. Children shouted, "Silk is our freedom." The skeptics had mocked the idea from the start. Silk in the Sahara. Foreign journalists sneered. Economists in Europe told Burkina Faso to stick to cotton and sorghum. But Traoré's gamble was never about pleasing the West. It was about proving that sovereignty could grow even in the harshest soil. He ordered the planting of mulberry groves where the earth still held groundwater. Shaded huts with solar-powered fans became homes for silkworms. Women, guardians of weaving traditions, were placed at the heart of this new industry, turning ancestral knowledge into national innovation, and the results shocked everyone. Textile workshops in Ouagadougou began spinning the raw cocoons into golden thread. Tailors transformed it into dresses, robes, and ceremonial uniforms that glistened with a brilliance rarely seen in West Africa. These fabrics didn't just clothe the people, they clothed an identity. Soon, Whispers spread from Dakar to Lagos. The desert now makes silk. Markets once filled only with millet and cassava suddenly displayed bundles of silk thread beside produce baskets. Farmers who once feared the next drought now carried cash from silk sales. In villages across the Sahel, hope was no longer imported in aid packages, it was homegrown. Traoré made sure the lesson was unmistakable. Our silk will not be stolen. He told his people, our silk will not enrich foreign hands. Every thread will build our schools, our clinics, our future. His words cut deep into the national spirit. For the first time in decades, Burkina's citizens were not waiting for the outside world to define them. They were spinning their destiny with their own hands. And yet, behind the celebration, there was also risk. Silkworms are fragile, demanding constant care. The Sahel is not an easy home. Failure could bring ridicule, perhaps even ruin. But Traoré understood that in moments of bold risk lay the seeds of strength. Even if the project faltered, it had already united his people around a shared vision of sovereignty. As the first rolls of silk were paraded through Ouagadougou's streets, banners waved and music filled the air. For once, the people of Burkina Faso were not defined by hunger or aid, but by a miracle of their own making. And that miracle left a haunting question. If 100 tons of silkworms can turn the desert into wealth, what else might this forgotten land be hiding, waiting to shock the world again? And now, my friends, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your hometown in the comments, because this story of silk and sovereignty deserves to be shared across every corner of the earth. In the eyes of many, President Ibrahim Traoré is more than a leader. He is a craftsman weaving a new fabric of sovereignty. His vision was never just about silk. It was about reclaiming dignity. For too long, Burkina Faso's wealth left its borders before its people ever felt its touch. Cotton was exported raw, gold disappeared into foreign vaults, and even the food on Burkina tables often depended on Western shipments. Traoré stood up and said no. His approach was radical, yet simple. Keep the value chain inside the nation. Instead of allowing silk cocoons to be exported cheaply, he ordered the construction of state-owned factories. Spinning, weaving, dyeing, and designing all stayed within Burkina hands. Every stage of the process created jobs, empowered families, and built local pride. When he declared in Parliament, our silk will build our schools, our clinics, our roads, it was not just a promise, it was a redefinition of leadership. Traoré's style is not one of speeches alone. He works with rolled-up sleeves, standing shoulder to shoulder with farmers and cooperatives. To his people, this image resonates deeply. They see a man who dares to bet on the impossible, not for applause abroad, but for sovereignty at home and in the shimmering threads of silk. They see proof that his vision is not a dream, it is a reality. And now, I invite you, my friends, to take part in this vision. If you believe that true leadership is built on courage, not compliance, then type the word courage in the comments. Let it stand as a reminder that even in the harshest desert, bravery can spin a nation's future. The miracle of silk in Burkina Faso is not measured only in fashion shows or glowing headlines. It is measured in villages, in clinics, in schools where children now carry books instead of hunger. For the first time in decades, money from a homegrown industry is flowing directly into the arteries of the nation. In Ouagadougou, a rural town long known for its crumbling classrooms, silk revenue built new schools with clean walls and desks for every child. In Kaya, mothers bring their children to clinics stocked with medicine purchased by the sovereign silk fund. Across the Sahel, roads that once cracked under the sun are being paved, connecting villages to markets where silk thread gleams beside millet and yams. At the heart of this transformation are women. For centuries, Burkina women carried the knowledge of weaving, dyeing, and crafting. Traoré's silk revolution gave them the tools to turn that knowledge into business. Women's cooperatives bloomed across the nation, each one raising silkworms, spinning thread, and selling cloth. With microloans backed by silk profits, many became entrepreneurs, employing their neighbors and funding local projects. Empowerment was no longer a slogan written on aid banners. It was lived reality, stitched into every strand of silk. The social shift was unmistakable. Families who once waited anxiously for the rains now invested in education and healthcare. Villages that once whispered of despair now spoke with pride. The worm is our wealth. And now, dear friends, I turn to you. If you believe that progress is not handed down by foreign aid, but built by the hands of a people, type the word progress in the comments. Let us celebrate that from silk threads. An entire nation is weaving hope. The day Burkina silk first appeared on the global stage, the world gasped. In Dakar, models strutted down the runway draped in gowns woven from threads born in the Sahel. The fabric shimmered under the spotlights, its golden sheen radiating an otherworldly glow. Whispers filled the hall. Silk from the desert. Impossible. Yet there it was, undeniable proof that what was once mocked as fantasy had become fashion. Weeks later, Paris boutiques began displaying scarves and dresses labeled Sahel gold threads. The irony was thick. Those who had laughed at the idea were now racing to buy it. Western magazines that once described Burkina Faso only in terms of famine suddenly ran glossy features with headlines like "From Dust to Silk." What had begun as laughter was now admiration, envy, and even fear. International buyers poured in. French fashion houses signed exclusive contracts. Gulf states, always hungry for luxury, ordered desert silk for royal robes. Chinese and Indian investors arrived with offers, eager to tap into what was quickly becoming an African textile empire. Yet through it all, President Ibrahim Traoré remained firm. He had not built this revolution to see it stolen. At the National Assembly, he stood tall, his voice a blade cutting through doubt. They told us the desert could give nothing. Today it gives us silk, it gives us schools, it gives us pride. Let the world know Burkina Faso will not sell its soul for scraps. His words were broadcast across Africa, igniting pride far beyond his borders. Opposition parties scrambled for arguments. How could they attack a leader whose silk funded hospitals and paved roads? Even critics admitted threads of gold now held the nation together. And yet, a question lingered like a shadow. Could this fragile empire withstand the storms of climate change and foreign greed, or would it unravel as quickly as it dazzled? My friends, if you believe there is power in transformation, power in turning dust into gold, then type the word power in the comments. Let us remind the world that even the weakest threads can bind a nation to destiny. Behind the dazzling glow of silk, the reality was far harsher. Silkworms, though miraculous in their transformation, are among the most fragile creatures on Earth. In the blistering heat of the Sahel, entire colonies perished when sudden waves of scorching wind swept across villages. Farmers who had invested their hope into trays of cocoons returned to find them lifeless. The sight was heartbreaking. Rows of empty trays where once there had been promise. Mulberry trees, the backbone of silk production, demanded water that the desert did not easily give. Wells ran dry. Irrigation canals turned to dust. In some regions, tensions simmered between farmers needing water for mulberry groves and herders desperate to save their cattle. For a nation already marked by resource conflict, silk sometimes seemed as though it might ignite division rather than unity. And then came disease. Outbreaks of grassery and flashery, the silent killers of silkworms, spread fear across entire districts. Rumors traveled faster than the desert winds. The worms are dying. Western commentators pounced, publishing smug headlines. Silk in the desert cannot last. Opponents whispered that the project was a bubble waiting to burst. But Traoré's answer was swift and uncompromising. He established the National Silk Authority, a watchdog to monitor outbreaks, train farmers, and distribute new silkworm strains adapted to the Sahel. He invited scientists from China, India, and Vietnam to work alongside Burkina universities, ensuring the project would never stagnate. His message was blunt. Our silk will not die because of foreign doubt. It will live because of Burkina courage. Foreign corporations saw the potential, and pushed hard. Multinational textile giants arrived with contracts designed to lure the nation into surrendering control. They promised investment, but their eyes were fixed on ownership. Traoré refused. Laws were passed. No foreign entity could own more than 20% of any silk-related business. It was a shield, but it came at a cost: diplomatic tension with powerful nations. Still, the people drew strength from struggle. "If our worms can survive the desert, so can we," said one farmer. To them, each challenge was not weakness, but proof that sovereignty was worth the fight. And now, let us raise a prayer together. Bless Africa. Amen. May resilience guide her people, and may the silk threads endure against every storm. The silkworm harvest did more than create fabric. It rewove the very fabric of Burkina society. For generations, rural families lived on the edge of survival, measuring their future by the rise and fall of the rains. But silk brought money into their hands in a way that cotton or aid never had. Markets that once sold only millet and dried fish now glimmered with bundles of golden silk thread. Villagers spoke with new pride. "The worm is our wealth." Women stood at the center of this transformation. Traditionally, the keepers of weaving and dyeing, they now became business leaders. Cooperatives multiplied, microloans expanded, and women who once struggled for survival found themselves employing dozens of neighbors. Their earnings built schools, purchased medicine, and financed community businesses. Across Burkina Faso, empowerment was no longer an imported concept. It was homegrown, spun from cocoons and courage. Politically, the impact was seismic. President Ibrahim Traoré, already a figure of fierce determination, gained legitimacy that speeches alone could never grant. How could opposition leaders argue against progress when villages pointed to silk-funded clinics, or when mothers proudly dressed their children in uniforms sewn from Burkina silk? The evidence was stitched into daily life. His popularity rose not because of slogans, but because of tangible results visible to every citizen. Internationally, Burkina Faso's image transformed almost overnight. Once described in foreign headlines as a land of coups and droughts, it was now hailed as the Silk Nation of Africa. Traoré entered African Union meetings no longer as the leader of a desperate, aid-dependent country, but as the architect of a continental model. His nation had turned mockery into mastery, and yet risks lingered. Centralizing so much wealth and power around silk and around one man's vision worried some observers. Could sovereignty built on a single thread prove strong enough to endure? Or might the same fabric that bound a nation together someday unravel under strain? My friends, I invite you now. If you believe unity is the true strength of any nation, type unity in the comments. And if you have not yet subscribed, this is the moment. Stay with us as we follow a story that continues to shake the world. The harvest of 100 tons was only the beginning. Standing beneath the blazing Sahel sun, President Ibrahim Traoré told his people, "This is not the end of a project. This is the beginning of an empire." His words carried more than symbolism. They carried a plan, one both ambitious and daring. The immediate goal was expansion. Within 5 years, Burkina Faso aimed to quintuple production, reaching 500 tons of silk cocoons annually. Fields that once lay cracked and barren began sprouting rows of mulberry trees. Solar-powered pumps brought water to regions long thought hopeless. Villages turned into regional hubs, each tied into a national network of silk cooperatives. The vision was clear. Every part of Burkina Faso, from the White Volta River Valley to the dry northern plains, would contribute to the silk economy. Factories in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso expanded beyond spinning raw silk. Designers were trained, dye houses opened, and Burkina fashion lines began exporting finished goods rather than just thread. Scarves, robes, and dresses branded under the label Sahel Gold Threads reached boutiques in Paris, Milan, and Dubai. What had begun as an agricultural experiment was evolving into a global luxury industry. But silk's future was not just about fashion. Traoré insisted on integrating it into the broader survival of his people. Mulberry leaves doubled as fodder for goats and cattle. improving livestock health. Silkworm waste was turned into organic fertilizer, raising yields for millet and maize. Even the shells of cocoons became protein supplements for poultry feed. In this closed-loop system, nothing was wasted, and every thread contributed to national resilience. The vision reached beyond borders. Delegations from Mali, Niger, and Chad came to study Burkina Faso's silk farms. Soon, talks of an African Silk Alliance began to take shape, an organization pooling resources, research, and markets so that no single country would face global competition alone. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as landlocked and aid-dependent, now positioned itself at the center of a continental alliance. The potential rewards were staggering. By the 10th year, projections showed silk exports rivaling gold as Burkina Faso's top earner, bringing in as much as $1, $8 billion annually. But unlike gold, this wealth was not buried underground. Controlled by foreign corporations, it was grown, nurtured, and woven by the hands of Burkina farmers, women, and youth. Yet, the challenges ahead were as vast as the desert itself. Climate change loomed like a storm on the horizon, threatening water supplies and mulberry growth. The global silk market remained volatile, vulnerable to swings in luxury demand and competition from synthetic fibers. Western corporations, having failed to secure ownership stakes, intensified pressure through lobbying, while the IMF and World Bank whispered about market liberalization, urging the nation to open its industry to foreign investors. Traoré's answer was to double down on sovereignty. Research partnerships were built with Asian universities, while Burkina scientists received funding directly from silk revenues. Youth programs train not only farmers, but also textile engineers, fashion designers, and entrepreneurs. He wanted an entire generation to see silk not as worms in trays, but as a future empire stretching from village fields to global fashion shows. The road ahead is both glittering and treacherous. Silk could become the golden thread that stitches Burkina Faso into the fabric of global power. Or it could unravel under the strain of drought, disease, and geopolitics. The gamble is real, but one truth is undeniable. This nation has proven that sovereignty is not given, it is spun. And now, my friends, let us close this chapter with faith. If you believe in victory for Africa, if you believe that nations can rise by their own hands, then carry this message forward. Victory, success, prosperity, amen. Let those words echo across deserts and oceans, because the story of Burkina Faso is not finished. It is only beginning. For the United States, the rise of Burkina Faso's silk industry is more than a surprise. It is an invitation. A nation once described in headlines only through droughts, coups, and despair has demonstrated ingenuity that rivals global powers. If silkworms can thrive in the Sahel, then so can new partnerships, grounded not in dependency but in innovation. American universities already lead in biotechnology, water efficiency, and sustainable textiles. Collaborations with Burkina scientists could strengthen silk strains, improve irrigation systems, and expand eco-friendly fabric production for U.S. fashion brands. Increasingly focused on sustainability, Sahel silk offers more than luxury. It offers a story, fabric woven with resilience, dignity, and sovereignty. Such narratives resonate deeply with consumers seeking authenticity. Globally, the reaction has been diverse but largely supportive. European fashion houses embraced Sahel gold threads, while Asian partners contributed expertise in breeding and weaving. Gulf states invested in trade routes to bring Burkina silk into royal courts and luxury markets. What began as a local gamble was now shaping global supply chains. For Africa as a whole, Burkina Faso's silk revolution became a beacon. Neighbors in Mali, Niger, and Chad saw not just cocoons, but a model for agro-industrial independence. The idea of an African Silk Alliance began to crystallize a future where nations stand together against foreign monopolies and write their own destiny. The broader lesson for America and the world is simple. This is not a story of confrontation, but of collaboration. The question is no longer whether the Sahel can survive, but how nations can work together to turn resilience into shared prosperity. From a distance, it still sounds impossible. Worms in the desert spinning freedom. Yet in Burkina Faso, this impossibility has become a reality. What was once mocked as madness has been transformed into a movement of sovereignty, stitching together not only fabric but a nation's pride. Ibrahim Traoré, standing with sleeves rolled up and hands buried in silkworm cocoons, shocked the world not with weapons or wars, but with threads of silk. The first harvest of 100 tons was more than an agricultural achievement. It was a declaration of independence. It told the world that a country long defined by famine could redefine itself through courage. It showed that sovereignty is not imported with aid, but woven from within, strand by fragile strand, until the cloth becomes unbreakable. And yet, the haunting question remains: will this silk empire endure against drought, disease, and foreign pressure? Or will it unravel as quickly as it dazzled? The answer has not yet been written, but what is certain is this: Burkina Faso has already proven that even in the harshest desert, life can spin new hope, and a people long underestimated can rise to astonish the world. So, my friends, as we close this chapter, carry the message forward. If worms can teach us the secret of resilience, then nations too can weave their destiny from struggle. Let us declare together victory, success, prosperity, amen. May those words echo across Africa and beyond as a blessing not only for Burkina Faso, but for every nation daring to dream against the odds.